For example, I don't think you should have sex before marriage, and I don't think there should be prostitution and such. But they are not pushing these values, but rather push that a man should have sex with prostitutes and random women, and then shame that type of the same types of women you should have sex with for that behaviour. Yeah, I don't. I think marriage as a concept is strange. I think it's very old fashioned. I've got a relationship. I try not to talk about my personal life, but yeah, I think this kind of male being, it's just stereotypical, isn't it? It's the men have to be dominant and the women have to be subservient, and if that's not the case, then you're just a beta cock. I think it's pathetic, honestly. These kind of gender roles are ridiculous. I think there's a really big conversation to have around prostitution that I'm probably not well enough equipped to have right this second. But I mean, it's fine to hold that opinion. It's very see through. It's very see through, one-sided behaviour. It's cool for a man to have sex with 100 different women, but the moment a woman has sex with more than one man, unacceptable. It's just very see through, old-fashioned sexism, I think. And again, it's doing that by playing on the insecurities of young men. You know, they're worried that their woman's going to get distracted by other men. My woman's going to go off. At the end of the day, someone's not your property. They have the capacity to make those decisions themselves. And if you are not a nice person, they will end up with someone else, I think. But if you're a nice person, and if you're in a fulfilling relationship, you will not lose your woman. Does that make sense? Ridiculous mindset.
And say, listen, if you ever make shit like...
Alright, I've had enough of talking to you about vacation, mate. He constantly finds these kind of only... Right, it's a very complex conversation, right? Women have been told their whole life that their looks and that their body is a commodity, right? They are told their whole life that value can be placed on the way they look and that the way they dress and their attractiveness. And so, of course, a byproduct of that is women making the decision to be a prostitute or have an OnlyFans. That is a result of the society that we have created, right? But this guy absolutely hates that. And I know you said you don't support prostitution and whatnot, and sex before marriage, which is confusing, but that's fine. But he is on a different level of hatred.
Ladies, don't let your boyfriends stop you.
He's constantly finding like women with OnlyFans.
From finding your husband.
Listen up, boys.
And like this is just like typical nonsense rage bait, right?
Don't let your girlfriend
and he is
stop
falling
you
for it.
From finding your other girlfriend, especially if she posts herself like this. You're welcome.
I'm welcome for what? What are you talking about?
If you're a man, keep scrolling. Now that they're gone, ladies, you can always tell if a man is heavily into watching porn when they're having a hard time with you. Okay? It's
men like this jerk off to these women, watch their OnlyFans, and then complain. Exactly. It is playing on their insecurities, right? It's ridiculous.
You, baby girl. They're just so...
They're upset that they can't be with them, and so instead they're going to complain about them. Realistically, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this because it is important to counter the kind of Andrew Tate manosphere mindset. 99% of the people who find themselves to be in this kind of manosphere are going into relationships, quote unquote. So any kind of like friendship with a woman, thinking primarily of sex, right? They their end goal for any kind of conversation they have with anyone is, I'm going to fuck this person, which is such an unhealthy way of approaching a relationship. Even if it's a relationship as in a friendship, of course it's going to very quickly crumble. All you have to do is be a nice person. Like, prioritize making people happy and being a nice person. Nothing else matters. Like, if you're so obsessed with sex, take a step back from it, and that will eventually come if you're a nice person. That's how I feel like. That's what I feel. I think the other aspect is, instead of bettering themselves, they spend that time trying to make excuses as to why they're not being treated as if they're better, right? Maybe shut the fuck up, get off Instagram, and prioritize becoming a nice person, or learn how to talk to people in a way that doesn't make them think, oh, this creep just wants to fuck me, or spend some time like working on personal hygiene. Like, this guy can learn some of these things. Maybe learn how to not be an aggressive prick. Maybe spend some time outside, like understanding like realistic how people act, because they spend too much time on Instagram and their perception of reality becomes so warped, I think. Just terrifying. Prostitution only makes sense if you isolate it from societal values and dynamics. Once a society allows prostitution, such behaviour becomes more normalised. Women, especially those of lower economic status, will sell their bodies to men and may even be raised into this by porn industries or prostitution industries. Those who support prostitution thinks it's freeing for women just because it allows an extra possible choice, not realising that such society will influence and raise them for it. Right, like I said, it is such an unbelievably complex conversation, I think. Instantly, under the confines of our current society, I think it's massively problematic. The moment the idea of being paid for it becomes introduced, I think it's so hard to word, right? Our society is massively problematic with any kind of... So hard to word. It's similar, in my opinion, to the legalisation of drugs. Allowing crystal meth in society is not more freeing because it's an extra choice of stuff to consume. We need to go slowly here because it is very difficult to break down. And like I said, I'm quite ill, so my brain's not working to full capacity. Talking about prostitution, I think women, again, I'm not a woman, so I shouldn't be talking about this really realistically, but women should have the freedom to choose what they do with their body, right? The problem is our society is set up in a way that makes people dependent on money, right? People become very desperate, very dependent on money. And so that... Sorry, my phone's bugging off. That inherently is a very problematic power dynamic, isn't it? It's so difficult. See, my brain capacity is not at its level to discuss this, I don't think. I think it's a very important discussion to have, because there's lots of different factors that affect it. Regarding drugs, I think the idea of legalising drugs isn't so much to give people more choice. It's to take the power away from the drug gangs that have so much power and influence over the drug market. The moment it becomes legal and more easy to access safe drugs, the need for a black market is completely gone. And the moment that's gone, there's much less risk with drug taking. Realistically, if someone's going to take a drug, they're going to take it. It doesn't really matter what barriers you put there to prevent that. We've seen it with the prohibition in America. People are going to take these things regardless of how much you try to restrict them. And so it's much better to give them access to safe and, and at least cheaper drugs, right? To prevent risk and to prevent death and to prevent spread of infections and stuff, than it is to constantly try to arrest them for it. The scenario is simply to explain the principle that having drugs at all. The scenario is simply to explain the principle that having drugs at all, just because it's more choice, is worse, not better, isolated from other factors. Having drugs at all is worse. Just because it's more choice is worse, not better. I think it's separate from choice. We're not. So I'm a massive supporter of the Green parties, and they have proposed to legalise drugs. And my understanding is that it's not because people should have the choice. It's more because under the current confines, black markets thrive, and there's constant unsafe drugs being sold, mixing of drugs, and the moment that moves to government ownership, it's much safer, and the black markets just crumble. If you do not have to deal with the black markets, would you support banning drugs? I think it's an unrealistic hypothetical. The black market is a result of the banning of drugs, right? The war on drugs has resulted in the black market. That's not going to go away. There's no realistic way to get rid of that. Purely for theoretical value. I think drugs and alcohol and cigarettes and all these kind of dangerously addictive negatives for your body are all things that should be banned, yeah. I think I've seen lots of arguments of stuff like weed being helpful. I think maybe after lots of research, but I think the downsides of it are much larger than the upsides of it. I don't think it's about freedom to access. I think it's just simply dangerous, especially when there's an addiction element to it. But that's just my personal belief. I'm not really sure. We agree. Yeah, I don't think people should have access to things that are dangerous for them. And I think it just gets even more problematic in that it becomes something that people try to profit off. Realistically, cigarettes should be banned. They're not really things that people can make easily if they're not legal. But the reason they're not banned is because you can make so much money off it. And it's the same reason why weed is still banned. It's because weed is so easy to grow that there'd be no realistic way for governments to make profit from it. They couldn't tax it because people can just grow it in their garden. I find it very frustrating. But yeah, I agree these dangerous things should be banned. But again, there's no point in discussing these kind of hypothetical situations because realistically, we're never going to reach a situation where that's possible. It's like how I believe that there's no point discussing communism with people because we'll never reach a situation where we can achieve communism. Instead, we have to discuss what are the immediate steps that we can take to better our society. I don't know, it's difficult. I think it's a real difficult topic. I'm noting down the prostitution thing because when I'm feeling better and when I don't have as much brain fog, I'd love to discuss it in more depth because I do think there's a lot of a discussion to have about it. Unfortunately, I've got something called chronic fatigue, right? And it results in whenever I have done anything, I get very ill. So I get very fatigued afterwards. So whether I have to go see someone or have a doctor's appointment, I very, very quickly deteriorate mentally. I feel very tired, very achy, and my brain just doesn't work. The main issue is something called brain fog. And I just can't sift through my brain to get the right things out. And already I have diagnosed ADHD as well, and so at the starting point is difficult already. Getting my brain to work with unimaginable brain fog, it just gets 10 times worse. So it's difficult, but I don't want that to be like a restriction from streaming because I really enjoy it, and so I thought I'd go live today to just talk about this stuff like this kind of like AI nonsense or Babylon. Does it hurt? Yeah, loads. Yeah, constantly. Litty Bras, how you doing, mate? How'd you get that little chicken? That's cute. Baby chick, I like that. Yes, it does hurt constantly. I don't really know how it works. It's something to do with the brain, I think. But if the way I can describe it is, before I had chronic fatigue, I remember having, people call it the man flu, but I remember having the flu really bad. And there's a point where you're like peak illness of the flu, where your whole body hurts and you can't move properly and your brain really hurts. It's like that constantly, essentially. And it gets worse when I do things, unfortunately. Lizzie Bros, I think it depends on your definition of banned, to be honest. Does banned mean criminalised for personal use? Because if yes, that's draconian. Overly punitive and criminalises addiction, I'm guessing. However, if your definition of banned is decriminalised for personal use, but criminalised for drug supply up to a certain amount, that should be illegal. Listen, this is why I say it's like unrealistic to talk about the hypotheticals. I think like if I had a button that could remove alcohol and cigarettes and like drugs, realistically, I'd press the button to get rid of it. But that's simply because I know an unimaginable amount of like damage to people's lives come about of it, and I understand that realistically there's no way of doing that without like a magical situation where a button removes it, and so that's why I don't think it's worth talking about in this hypothetical. Realistically, people will get a hold of something if they want to get a hold of it, no matter how much you try and ban it. I think the method that the Greens propose is the most realistic, where we massively criminalise those who are trying to produce it, but don't punish people for doing it, and instead just try to help them. And by legalising it and kind of regulating it, right, or legalising it up to a point where it's able to be accessed through doctor's appointments, the power of the black market and like the danger of drugs, because realistically the danger is because it's illegal you can't do it safely, or because it's illegal you can't access clean drugs, right? That's where the main problem comes from, I think. I think it should just totally ban all usage, ideally. It's garbage, addicting, and ruins your body. Yeah, the problem comes from banning it is not actually preventing people from being able to access and do it, right? The current system in England is just banning. Like, you're not allowed to do it, you're not allowed to buy it, you're not allowed to have it on you. And if you look at drug deaths and like the spreading of illnesses, it's just not worked. The war on drugs has not worked at all. And so instead we should really move into a system that views it as a health crisis rather than a crime crisis. People who are addicted to drugs are having a health issue, I think. And so we should be referring them to like doctors instead of jails. That's my opinion. And the Green Party reflects that with their proposition to legalise drugs. Legalising drugs won't make more people take drugs, but will view the people taking drugs in a much different way and in a much more health crisis view, if that makes sense. As for marriage, I am Muslim, and here is how we do it. For a marriage, there are multiple requirements. If you want to marry a woman, you must have the courage to meet with her parents and discuss her intentions honestly and openly. Your intentions honestly and openly. Then you must provide a dowry. See, I think, I think people who are religious should have freedom to practice their religion. But in my opinion, it's all quite nonsense. Not religion, but like this whole marriage idea. I think it's a result of gender stereotypes and gender roles. and I think it's very outdated. We don't need like different systems for men approaching women in certain like I find it all ridiculous, you know. If you want to marry a woman, you must have the courage to meet with her parents and discuss your intentions honestly and openly. Like that is still working off the idea that women are property. I mean, I'm not saying you believe that, but I'm saying that's based on that system where, you know, you have to talk to the parents about changing ownership of the woman, because at the moment it's the woman's property, and so you have to provide a good enough dowry to like make it worth giving up their property. I find it all very bizarre. I don't think, like, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't think you should be changing ownership of someone. I think if you want to spend your life with someone, that's something that you can choose to do. And I mean, there's not really any harm in marriage, I don't think. But it's so old-fashioned and based on religion that's not really relevant anymore, in my opinion. I don't know, it's difficult. Then you must provide a dowry. I think that's very problematic. I don't like that at all. Financial incentives, so that if you leave the marriage and hop from woman to woman, this will bankrupt you. But do the women have to provide a dowry to the man's parents? Because that's something that both genders can do. Thirdly, there will be a marriage ritual where you invite family and friends as a social incentive. See, I think that's nice. I think marriage as a concept is quite nice, right? But I don't think it's necessary. It's nice. It's a nice idea to have family together to celebrate a union between people, but it's just made up nonsense in my head, you know. What I'm positioning is not a hypothetical. What I'm positioning is harm reduction. Yeah. I think I know we're a bit behind in the messages, and I'm talking a little bit slowly to get through the messages in time. But I agree with you. I think we should be focusing on harm reduction and looking at it as a health issue. I'm not imposing criminal sentences for those using them, but rather those supplying them. Yeah, I completely agree. Realistically, we can't remove something from being from happening. There's no, and I mean, in the UK, we've tried to do that for the last 15 years. We've been constantly playing on the war on drugs, and it just has not worked. It's time to stop that method and move towards a health-focused policies that are health-focused, I guess. Health-focused mindset. Your belief ultimately involves incarcerating huge amounts of people for an addiction problem. I agree. Addicts are victims. They shouldn't be filling prisons. Your policy apparatuses don't make the world a better place. Sorry to be the bearer of truthful news. See, yeah, I agree. Humanistic approach. Okay. Yeah, I mean, realistically, people who take drugs are a result of the system failing or society failing. If society was successful, people wouldn't resort to drugs. That's my belief. And so it's not something that they should be held personally accountable for. We should see them as, like you said, we should see them as victims of a very upsetting situation. And realistically, 99% of the time, the people struggling from drug addiction are working class people who have been pushed towards that because, you know, again, society has failed them. And so we should be looking at them as, victims and people that need health intervention rather than people who need to be locked up. It doesn't work. I think it's ridiculous. Yeah, addicts are victims. I agree. I completely agree. The point is so that dipshits that just want to have sex with a woman and leave her has to talk with her dad first. And most of these men do not have the courage, so they do not want to misuse her. I think that continues to play on like harmful gender roles. I understand it's traditional, but I think, especially nowadays in society, women have the ability to make that decision for themselves. If they want to be promiscuous and spend time with men, I don't think there's any reason to bar them. Like, they shouldn't be prevented from doing what they want to do, you know? And I think the fact that the system is different for women and men is a little bit strange. Dowry goes from the man to the woman. She is not being bought. The parents do not get the dowry. It is similar to the ring that you give a woman, but instead it is just money or traditional cattle or other resources. Yeah. Yeah, see, I disagree with like the whole ring idea as well. I don't think you should have to demonstrate how much value you can provide a woman. And again, it is always the men instilling this onto the woman. It's always the man who has to take the kind of financial step to show that they will be able to provide. I think it's just very old-fashioned and continues to play on these like harmful gender roles. I think our society has progressed in a way that people should have their own ability to make these choices. Like, if you want to spend your life with someone, you can choose to do that. You don't need to go to their parents and ask for permission. I think that's very, very outdated. And again, I think it's fine for people to practice religion, and I think we should be very encouraging for people to feel safe to practice their religion. But I think when it becomes something that affects individual decisions so much, I think that's where it becomes a little bit problematic. Why do you think the rules should be the same for men and women? Don't you think that typically, at least, men tend to approach women differently than women approach men? Meaning, usually it is the man that is being sneaky and tricking the woman for sex. Women do not typically trick men into sex. I think that's a result of our failed society. So the idea of differences in the gender, most of them come from most of them are from gender roles, right, which I think are made up. It's a very complex topic for such a bad brain day. I think maybe that's fine for the past, right? It's understandable to look back and understand why that was common in the past. But I think now it is important for people to have their own choices. It's like prostitution. Typically, women sell their bodies to men, not the other way around. So I don't think these are made up irrelevant roles, like pink being for women, but rather something that goes across society. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a result of societal problems. Like, for example, prostitution isn't inherently problematic, I don't think. It's fine for women to make the choice to use their body in the way that they want to use it. But at the moment society's problems in that, like, poverty or problematic power dynamics come into play, then it becomes problematic. I think the idea of marriage being like that comes from a society that has failed these people in that women can't make their own decisions. They're not allowed to make their own decisions. If they were allowed to make their own decisions, men would take advantage of that. This is all a result of society's failings. And as we move away from that, and as we become more progressive and modern, women should have their own... Realistically, women should be able to make their own decisions, right? Exactly. Every single time you say, like, women might get tricked, I remember the word. Shit. You're taking away, not the onus, it's not the onus. You're taking away the agency, right? You just said it, agency. You're taking all agency away from women. They are completely able to make their own decisions, and the moment you're trying to influence that, that's the problem, in my opinion. How exactly do you think this would work? If men give a dowry to women, and then the woman gives a dowry back, isn't that the same as just not doing anything? I'm not saying I like the dowry system, but it should be implemented in both ways. I'm saying that system, in my opinion, is ridiculous and shouldn't be a thing at all. Again, I don't have a problem with religion, and I think people should be free to practice whatever religion they want. But again, the idea of a dowry being given to the parents so that the possession of the woman transfers from the parents over to the husband, I think that's problematic and plays on, again, gender roles. That's my opinion. I don't think... I purely asked if the dowry goes both ways because then it would be less problematic, I guess. But again, yeah, it makes sense that it wouldn't make sense then. I mean, So I don't think when you marry, the idea of giving a ring is like a man displaying their ability to provide, right? I think that is problematic. But I quite like the idea of like a symbolic gift between, like if both the man gives something to the woman and the woman gives something to the man, and it's a gift and it's like something symbolic and meaningful, I think that's fine. But again, it's the moment it becomes taking away the age. Again, yeah, you said it really well. It's the agency. The moment you're taking away agency from the woman, that's when it's bad, I think. How exactly do you think this would work? We've read that. This argument basically assumes women lack agency and men are uniquely deceptive, then builds a system around those stereotypes. Yeah, and I mean, in society, the failings of society has led to that idea being okay. Like, it is seen as okay for men to sleep with many women and women not to be allowed to sleep with many men. But separate from society, it's just made up nonsense, right? Then builds a system around that stereotype. But even within Islamic law, things like mahr are about protecting women's rights, not punishing men. And the idea that only men manipulating or trick in relationships just doesn't hold up. Both genders are capable of deception, just differently. If your justification for unequal roles is a generalization about behavior, that's a pretty weak foundation. Yeah, and that's why I say as we move away from these kind of like harmful roles for men and women, the idea of marriage and the idea of like needing to do certain rituals is just unnecessary, I think. If you meet someone you love, regardless of gender, it is fine to do a symbolic ritual to like prove your love. Like have a wedding, that's fine. But it really is based on like harmful old-fashioned gender roles, aren't they? I don't think that system is needed anymore. Do you really think this is a stereotype though? Because it is typically the woman whose intercourse is valued more across society. Men buy sex from women. Women use sex to manipulate men for certain things in marriage. This is a universal thing across society. So if you want to make a system to ensure the success of a marriage, forcefully treating it the same just for the principle of equality doesn't make sense when these differences exist in your society, and men indeed do get. So I think you're coming at it from the idea that naturally in society men and women act differently, and so we have to treat them differently. When in actuality, I think the fact that you treat them differently is the reason why we see these differences crop up, right? My ideal is that we move away from the different treatment between men and women, and then there won't be this kind of problematic difference in the way people act because they aren't being treated differently. Does that make sense? The ability to make decisions should be equal between men and women. And the more we move towards that, the less there will be these kind of like differences in the way people are acting. It's so frustrating because I know exactly what I want to say, but it just goes immediately in my brain. I think, obviously you guys don't watch the YouTube videos I make, but I do want to do quite an in-depth video about how my brain doesn't work, just so people understand why I'm not able to make the arguments that I'm trying to make as well. You're talking socially conditioned patterns and treating them like universal truths. You're taking socially conditioned patterns and treating them like universal truths. Men paying for sex and women leveraging desirability isn't hardwired. It reflects power, economics, and social risk. I think that's essentially what I was saying. It's not like a universal truth. It's something that has arisen from society's inequalities. Change those conditions and the behaviour shifts. Yeah. And even if averages differ, that doesn't justify unequal rules. Systems should protect individuals on both sides, not bake in stereotypes about who's more manipulative. Exactly. And if we focus on setting up systems that revolve around these unhealthy dynamics, we're not doing a very good job of helping them move away from those unhealthy dynamics, if that makes sense. If our systems are set up around them, they're not ever going to go away. Do you think men and women just inherently have different brain chemistry, amounts of desire in sex, and wants that causes different dynamics? I think men bisect from women because their hormones and brain chemistry makes them value sex differently. I massively disagree with you there. And I think it's fine to have disagreements. I don't want you to feel as though I'm like ganging up on you in chat. Obviously, there's only 3 of us here. And in my opinion, 99% of the differences between men and women modernly, like nowadays, are a complete result of society and the way society views men and women, right? I think regardless of anything you believe happened inherently, we can easily move to a society that treats men and women equally, and then those issues won't be arising anymore. And again, I know you said it's a nice discussion, but I am like, I am very, the arguments I'm trying to make aren't stringing together very well. I'm ill. My brain doesn't work. But I think it's an important discussion to have. Might be something I'll have to revisit another day when I'm a bit clearer. I get what you're saying, man. You think it's mostly social. Exactly. And it's the same with like, I've had a massive argument on Twitter with some people. I should probably take this off screen. We don't want, not objectifying people. We'll have...
Okay, kurzes Outfit-Check mit meinem
Wait there.
Verlobten. Wir gehen jetzt auf einen...
I'll get a good picture of Lord Farquaad on. There we go. Oh, he can stay. I had quite a big argument on someone on Twitter regarding IQ. People believe that IQ is like a thing that's baked into like genetics, right? People think that IQ is based on genetics. And I believe that's complete nonsense. I think almost the majority of one's IQ stems entirely from society, really, like the way you're treated and the way you're brought up. It's the idea of nature versus nurture. I don't think much is depending on nature anymore. I think almost the majority of noticeable differences between genders or between races or between any of these kind of differences in humanity are almost entirely nurture. It's almost entirely stemming from the different way that we're treated or the different way that we're brought up or the different way that society treats us. Do you believe if the social dynamics were the same and only the hormones and brain chemistry are different, do you think if social dynamics were the same and only the hormones and brain chemistry were different, wouldn't that cause the same gender roles again over time just from that? I think they're so meaningless and they're so inconsequential that if social dynamics were the exact same, nothing would come up from it, I think. I think society has such a massive impact over the idea of gender roles that if people were treated equally, there would be no issue, that people would stay being treated equally. I hope that makes sense. Like, if we boil down my argument, it is simply, I believe nurture has such a massive influence over an individual and nature has barely any difference, right? That's the core of what I believe. I hope that makes sense. I think you're trying to argue that because it's a woman, they act a certain way, and then because it's a man, they act a certain way, and that's decided based on them being men or women, which is fine if you believe that. Even among men, hormonal differences change social dynamics. So I think that I think if in the same-sex hormones cause entire hierarchies and dynamics, then surely you can never achieve that kind of equal behaviour. Even among men, hormonal differences change social dynamics. Interesting. It's interesting, isn't it? I think realistically, how much of a difference does that have on the way people act, though? How much does hormonal differences change social dynamics? See, I don't know. And it's not something I can figure out, because realistically, the way people are treated in society always takes precedent, in my opinion. You could point to like people with lower testosterone being less successful than people with high testosterone, but then you could also look to people having lower testosterone causes stereotypically them to be like less masculine, don't they? And inside society, people who are more masculine are prioritized and are more successful because that's like society values them more. Does that make sense? Men are stronger and testosterone causes them to act more dominant. I don't think that just by random chance, the idea that men are more dominant just spawned by chance. It will come back every single time regardless, no matter how many social resets you have. Yeah, but I think that is just a very... like that is only... let me word it right. That only shows when in a system that requires it. So, obviously, like in nature, the woman is the one who births, right? So the man has to protect and forage whilst the woman is at home birthing. And like in nature, in the old days, that was relevant, but now we can completely move away from that and it's completely irrelevant. And so we don't need to be building our society on that. And as we move away from it and as it becomes less necessary, the differences we see from that just completely become irrelevant. You're constantly jumping from some biological difference exists to these dynamics are natural and fixed, which doesn't follow logically, in my opinion. Hormones may affect libido on average, but they don't explain things like paying for sex or marriage norms. Yeah. If it were just brain chemistry, patterns would be consistent everywhere. Yet societies are different country to country. Biology shapes tendencies, sure, but it doesn't shape rigid social rules. Yes. The power structure of that country do that. Yeah, and I think that's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that like these are a result of the way people are treated rather than the way people are just born. And as we move away from that different treatment, the kind of differences that show themselves are just completely irrelevant. They're only relevant under our current society. Hormones may affect libido on average, but don't explain things like paying for sex or marriage norms. And I think these differences that we see, or these effects that stuff like hormones have, completely melt away under equal treatment. Men pay for sex because they have a higher sex drive and lower trust boundary or requirements for women. I disagree. I think that is a result of society. I think within our society, we've made it so that women are seen as objects for men's sexual desires, right? And so that introduces the idea of like scarcity and like needing to fight in order to acquire that, which kind of like transforms it into currency, which is why some men feel as though they must pay in order to have access to that, because they feel like they don't get it in other they won't be able to get it in any other way. And this is very funny because it is just three men discussing women. I want to make it clear that I don't feel like I'm in the right. Woke gay Mark says, crazy conversation to click into. Yes, I agree. And like I said, I do not have the brain processing power to be discussing this. I think, firstly, I'm not a woman, so I can't really make these decisions. Does that's like a good basis to jump off from. Men pay for sex because they have a higher sex drive, blah, 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 we've read that. It's too deeply wired. Your brain works the way where if you hear tiny sounds in someone's voice, the pitch speed, this changes your behaviour and makes you more shy or dominant. Pheromones in the air, hormones and chemistry changes how you act. See, I think that is all relatively irrelevant nowadays. I think maybe that was relevant 2 billion years ago. I'm basically a PhD in women, maybe more than most women. Many such cases. I've read feminist literature. I think, listen. I'm the Twitch streamer here, okay? I was the one who pressed live. I think that gives me the power to talk on behalf of all women, okay? I'm going to take that position because, I'm a brave man. I can take that position, I think. Again, you're talking selective evolutionary examples and overstretching them into universal human roles. It's a very interesting topic to be discussing, and I think it is similar to the idea that IQ is dependent on genetics, which again I think is ridiculous. Maybe it's relevant under very, very specific circumstances, but as we move away from those circumstances, it is completely irrelevant. As we treat genders more equally, right, the idea of differences between the genders just completely disappear. Selective evolutionary examples and overstretch them into universal human rules. I can't even read, guys. I can't even read. Oh, Woke Gay Marxist, you're new. Drop me a follow. And with each new account you make, follow me. I need more followers. I've only got 10 followers. It's wild to me. Human behaviour isn't a bird mating dance, bro. Culture, economics, and power matter a lot. Men paying for sex reflects market dynamics. Exactly. And social norms, not just drive. And women do pay for sex too. I don't know if I don't know if I can say that. Gigolos. Isn't that to do with clowns? I thought that was clowns. Escorts, sugar arrangements. The pattern isn't one directional. You're just perceiving it that way. I think that us thinking we can go beyond biology and undo biological differences in behaviour. I think... Gigolo. Yeah, I swear that's an offensive word though. What is a gigolo? Either I thought that was an offence, like a slur, or I thought that was a clown. Isn't there like a group of people who dress as clowns? What are they called? It's not offensive. My brain's all miswired. What are the clowns called? I swear there's a word similar to that describes the group of people who dress as clowns. Like the music. Never mind, my brain's not working. Well, it may be to certain people, I suppose, but it's just a term for a male sex worker who has female clients only. Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. Nothing to do with clowns then. I don't know what I'm talking about. Oh, a juggalo. A juggalo. A juggalo. Juggalette. The name given to fans of the group Insane Clown Posse. So that's where I got it from. Okay. I got a little bit confused, guys. It's okay. See, I've had this conversation about genetics and about how biologically we are different, and I've come to the conclusion, in my opinion, that it really doesn't have an effect on us in modern day. almost all of our behavior and intelligence and any kind of things that you can measure like that are very much dependent on our nurture. So like the way we're brought up, the way society interacts with us as an individual. And the reason these differences come about is because within our society is baked in different treatment, right? I'm not stringing together my words. I'm not stringing together my words properly, but society treats people differently. And that's like society is an overarching idea, right? Society being like the way people are treated, the way jobs interact with things, the way people's like, it's just everything, the way everything interacts. That is what decides our behavior and our intelligence and everything like that. And the moment that's treated more equally is the moment those kind of differences start to disintegrate. The first G is pronounced as J, that's fine, blah, 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 blah. Most animal explanations for our species fall flat post-enlightenment. That's another thing that I know I had a discussion about. The moment we got to start deciding our own behaviour and our own outcomes is the moment evolution and biology and all these kind of like primal influences just went completely out the window. We are not evolving anymore because we completely decide our own future and our own outcomes, right? I think that is a very similar reason as to why these differences between gender and race are completely irrelevant now, other than the fact that society treats them differently. Animal explanations, blah, blah, blah. Post-enlightenment. I think that's what you mean by post-enlightenment. When we started being able to make our own decisions and stuff, our social reality is heavily informed by our material conditions. My brain is too melted to have these kind of deep conversations, but it's fine. Ever since the social justice reformation of the 20th to 21st century, we have language and gender studies that address essentialist narratives that have haunted social culture over the history. Very complex. Gender norms are so unstable nowadays because the superstructure of masculinity and culture and performance around manhood is no longer needed by the modern material base and achievement. In the expansion of recognised interiority of the marginal other of the prioritised experience of history. None of that's going in, but yes, I'm sure that makes sense. Essentially, we've progressed as a society to not need those kind of things anymore, and so they're not relevant anymore. Is that right? Also, even if you think you can undo biology, until you actually do in your society and prove it by doing so, it is useless to have systems of marriage that treat the man and woman differently, because you don't have a society where men and women act the same yet. I think that's a very interesting thing to be saying, because if you look at the differences between all these different societies, there is massive differences between the differences of men and women, right? Like, you say that you focus on very traditional marriages where women aren't allowed to have sex before. I'm guessing it's both genders aren't allowed to have sex before marriage, and then you have to present a dowry. That's not really thought about in more progressive societies, right? Or in more progressive areas of the world. Does that make sense? And that difference is showing that different treatment decides how differences are showing up. My brain. Fine. Gender norms are so unstable. Yeah, we've read that. Also, even if you can undo biology. See, I think that's ridiculous because we will never be able to undo biology if we continue treating people differently based on their biology. Does that make sense? You're treating a simple animal model as if it explains complex human behaviour. Humans aren't birds, that's my point. Our norms, laws, incentives, shapes behaviour far more than fixed mating displays. Variation within sexes is huge, and cross-culture differences show these roles aren't rigid. Yes, also, women are always picky, men aren't, and constantly true. Isn't consistently true. Biology influences tendencies, but it doesn't lock in social roles. in the way you're claiming. Yeah, and I think the idea of it being so locked in is another factor which causes it to be so believed. Does that make sense? If you're constantly saying women are like this, men are like this, then that's not like constantly believing and treating them like that isn't going to allow for that change. I understand humans are more complex than birds, but I still think humans have mental differences by sex. They might be different than birds, but you have differences in a human way. I think that's fine to have that argument, but I think it's so minute and irrelevant, nowadays especially, that it's not even worth thinking about. They might be different than birds, but you still have differences in a human way. Explain fashion through biology, lol. Biology essentialism is such low IQ position. I'm sorry, like, historically gender is created by discourse. Yeah, that's the core of what I'm saying. Yeah. Not everything is biological. Just because I think biology affects the brain. You would like this. Let's have a little look. The genetics myth. Click from Zeitgeist. James Gilligan? No. Who was it? Give me a second. I read, so literally I went down like a massive rabbit hole, right, of the interaction between IQ and gender. Okay? If you talk to anyone about IQ and gender, they think that it has quite a big influence. And then if you ask them to cite their sources, they always talk about the twin study. They always talk about the twin studies, right? And I spent genuinely like 3 days of my life just reading up all of these studies and then looking at where they're funded. And they all originate from like Nazis. They're all like paid for and funded by Nazis. But because it's not talked about much, it's kind of becoming like this kind of global agreement that IQ does change. Like we're constantly seeing Americans talk about how Somalis are so low IQ. Do you know what I'm talking about? I think it's very similar. Thank you for the video. I will absolutely watch this. And I think I'll have to very quickly look it up. Twin studies debunked. There's this great guy who does so much talking about this specific... Right. Sorry, I'm going a little bit too quick. Bouchard, this guy, T.J. Bouchard Jr., was funded entirely by Nazis, right? And every single kind of study that backs up this idea that IQ is based on genetics stems from this. That's what I find so interesting. I wanted to find the guy who I was reading loads of. I think he's one of the people who made this video. I'm not sure. I'll have to look at it later off stream. But I think it's very interestingly linked to what we're talking about now. The kind of idea that biology entirely decides how you behave and how intelligent you are. You're explaining societal narratives through pseudoscience. You've missed the last few centuries of societal academia. I think you need to learn what epigenetics is, by the way. You can say you disagree, but just calling it pseudoscience doesn't carry any argumentative weight than saying no without justification. Was it biological for men to wear high heels and dresses? Do you see? Yeah, it's intertwined with the idea of what gender is. Do you think societal discourse has a heavy influence on what constructs the grammar of gender? Asking me all kinds of things are biological because I think biology matters for psychology is equal to me listing off stuff that's red and asking, is this green? I mean, that's interesting because I am actually colourblind. Anyway, as an argument for why green does not exist. Yes, stuff that is just cultural. Okay, fine. Don't have to watch it now. But I heard you talking about IQ, genetics, etc. And the role of genetics is really... See, that's exactly what I was arguing. And I went on a 3-day spiral of that. And I was getting absolutely dogpiled on Twitter. So many Nazis were talking to me about how I'm so fucking stupid. And I did so much research. I've got a whole bank in my brain of these random things about IQ. And I would love to talk about it more, especially on stream when I'm not brain melted. I will absolutely watch that video, thank you. I completely agree, it's completely overstated. I think nowadays it is completely almost entirely irrelevant, the idea of like genetics and the differences between genders and the way they act, if that makes sense. It's completely dependent on the way society treats someone, the way one is treated by society. After you watch that video and go into what epigenetics is, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, my brain is like a sieve, and anything that I research loads just goes quite quickly. But I did have proper debates with these idiots. Oh, that's not very nice. This is an example of the kind of treatment I get on Twitter, guys. So rude. I don't know how to bring up my account and see what I've been tweeting. Me. This is me. I've got a nice edited picture. If I type in genetics, you can probably see and look at all this. Proper discussions. And of course, most of the people that I was arguing with are these like freak far-right Nazis. Oh, disgusting people. IQ was a genetics project. Eugenics product. Yeah, I agree. A lot of the time spent was looking at where the funding was coming from and like the ideas of the groups behind these studies and stuff. And almost all of them are like modern neo-Nazis. It's really interesting. I mean, it's really interesting how little that aspect of it is not talked about. I will absolutely watch this video. Thank you very much for this. I will save it. It's only 30 minutes. Don't have to watch it now, but I heard you talking about IQ. Yes, all of genetics is really overstated. It completely ignores epigenetics. The reality is that environmental factors, behaviours and lifestyle like diet will modify gene expression, turning genes on or off without changing the underlying DNA sequence. I think IQ is both genetics and has to do with learning. Obviously, if someone has a syndrome like Down syndrome, this will influence the potential for intelligence. I think extreme factors like that are very relevant, yeah, but they aren't. They are exceptions, if that makes sense. After you watch that video and go into it with epigenetics, you'll bury them. These people they absolutely are mostly Nazis. And you can tell because they always argue in a way that puts down women if they're talking about gender, or they always argue in a way that puts down minorities if they're talking about the IQ of different races. It's just, yeah, it's really evident. But what is your point? Do you believe a male brain? And the core of this argument is, how much of an effect do you think these things have on the difference between men and women? You believe that has a big effect, and that no matter how much society treats people as equals, there will always be these biological differences. I personally, and I think a lot of these people here in chat, completely disagree with that. I think that is essentially irrelevant nowadays, and I think it's almost entirely based on how society treats someone, how one is treated by society. I think that is almost 99% of what decides how someone will act, if that makes sense. Ignoring really exceptions like Down syndrome or like disabilities or mental health issues. After you watch the video, blah, 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 what's your point, blah, blah, blah. IQ was a genetics project, yes. Yeah, I believe that men and women have different brains. Arguing with people that have St. George Cross, Guy Fawkes in their Twitter handle is wild. Brother, that is what I do. When I don't have enough brain power to do a live stream, I'm just arguing with utter chuds on Twitter. I'll show you it there. Look, constant just arguing with idiots on Twitter. I love it. It is my hobby at the moment. And I'll show you something funny in a minute, but if you guys are up to date with the UK politics scene, you know who Zach Polanski is. And he has liked some of my funniest tweets. And it's always me just insulting right-wing people. I call people idiots, and he is always the first person to like them. I love it. It's so funny. Arguing with people that have, yes. How do you explain female illiteracy pre-feminism and the current domination of academia by women? Exactly. These kind of stereotypes just disintegrate the moment people start getting treated more equally. And the argument that people always point to is like the different treatment, not quite relevant. Because men were the smart ones, the logical ones for most of human history. It's women now, largely so. So my point is, biological differences is just cope and pseudoscience that is minuscule in modern projects. Fred, it's not just Down syndrome, it's other syndromes as well as other genetic changes. Down syndrome is just a random mutation. Other mutations can also make your IQ 10 higher or 10 lower, or make you that good at one type of thinking or bad at another. I think the only time it becomes relevant is when it's such an extreme outlier, like Down syndrome or... is it genius syndrome? No, what's it called? Oh, people were always talking about it. It's called... not prophecy. It's called... what's the name for someone who is born as like really... prodigy. Prodigy syndrome, is that it? It's always these massive outliers. My friend, you said a lot. I replied to one thing. Me? Not me. It's important to have nice, chill conversations. This is not like a argument, guys. It's all good. Illiteracy does not get solved because of feminism. There is a general trend for more literacy for men and women, but obviously women learn to read later since men are the primary workers in the workforce. The thing that's important is any kind of major difference completely gets erased the moment people are treated more equally. That's the core. Reply to one thing. It's difficult because we're having this discussion in a Twitch chat. It's hard to reply to like specific parts, especially when I'm not reading very quickly. I think your argument is just an extension of this kind of like this kind of idea that everything is pre-decided by your biology or by your genetics, and I really find it hard to believe nowadays. As we've moved away from these stereotypes, these people are not confined by those gender roles. We are seeing people be much more equal. I do think that men are more stoic and logical while women are more emotional. They still are. I would say the trend of more women in academia in the West is mostly because the men in the West are going down a very bad direction. They are not being treated properly and are wasting their life with video games and addictions to porn. But do you not think that is a result of society and the way certain groups are being interacted with rather than like genetic, biological differences? And surely the fact that differences like men being the dominant and now that they're not the dominant is like disproving of this idea that everything's decided by biology. Women are also workers, domestic workers. Women were also incredibly busy. Men were given opportunities to educate for a much longer time than women. The second women were allowed to enter the conversation, they dominated it. I don't think everything is biological, but some things are. It's partially each. Yeah, I see this argument a lot, but I really, really, really don't think that genetics has enough of an influence over the way people act for it even to be needed to be considered. I don't think it's relevant in the slightest. I think... I mean, the most... What time is that? Oh, it's 5, okay. The most... Like, a lot of my arguments here stem from the discussions I've had regarding IQ and genetics. But I do think it's similar with gender. It's very much a... It's a made-up it's a made-up concept, right? Concept? It's a made-up... It's completely made up. It's a societal structure, right? I think everything you've pointed to in this discussion can easily be explained as a result of society and the way society interacts with different groups. And if we were to remove these differences in society, we wouldn't be having this. If we were to remove them, there wouldn't be these differences, I don't think. The reason porn affects men in society more negative than women is because the same reasons why men are more interested in prostitutes. See, I completely disagree. I don't think it's this inherent difference in the way men and women are biologically coded. Biologically coded. I completely disagree. I think that is a result of the... Why? That is a result of the different treatments between men and women. 1 second. Sorry. No problem. No issue. No issue. Let's catch up. Also, Stoic is a philosophy you likely misunderstand. Stoicism is a branch of philosophy that you're projecting on an entire gender. Yeah, again, I don't think it's like a biological thing. Why do you think men are more drawn to porn? What causes that societally then? Are men being raised to watch porn and women raised to ignore it? I mean, exactly, yes, I think that is exactly what is happening. I mean, it's hard to boil it down to such a simple thing because I think you'll then go, oh, who's forcing them to do this? Who's forcing them to do that? When you need to really break it down to the complex, different ways that society interacts with people. Society views men and women as having to fill certain roles, don't they? And if they are not filling those roles, it's hard to break down. It's such a complex topic. Why do you think men are more drawn to porn? What causes that society then? Do you think if we took, I'll break it down in the kind of simple way you're trying to break it down. If we took 100 men and 100 women at birth and put them on an island and had like one side of the island where there's lots of porn and one side of the island where there's not much porn, do you think all the men would be going to one side and all the women would be on the other side? Like you're trying to break it down in such a simple, like nonsensical way. You really have to consider the complex way that society interacts with individuals to be able to have this discussion, right? I hope that makes sense. By ignoring that, you can very easily come to the conclusion that, oh, biologically, men act differently to women. But again, you're ignoring this complex way that society decides how people act. I'm pro-porn. This isn't a discussion if we're pro or not pro-porn. Thanks for letting me know your opinion on porn, woke gay Marxist, but that's not what we were talking about. Societal taboos around female sexuality are heavily documented, dude. Exactly. Like, women are taught from birth that their value in society is based on how attractive they are or how desirable their body is. That, of course, that's going to decide how they interact with porn and how they interact with like their view of identity. And arguing that, oh, it's just biological is completely ignoring this very complex thing that absolutely affects people. Brothels have been a thing where women were subjugated to sell sex and were othered by societies. Male sexuality has always been celebrated and normalised, exactly, by society, not biologically, because that doesn't make sense, but absolutely, societally, men have been praised for being promiscuous and women have been punished for that. And that's got nothing to do with biology. Most people aren't telling their sons watch porn, but they're celebrated for getting a girlfriend early. Exactly. And every kind of media that they consume, all kind of like discussions around it, have always backed up that idea that men need to act in a certain way and women need to act in a different way. That is baked into our society. And of course, people's outcomes are going to be decided by that, because from the immediate birth of someone, they are treated differently, inherently. And I think if we strip that away completely, the idea that you have of like gender stereotypes completely get thrown out the window. Celebrated for getting a girlfriend early. They're taught, you're a man, take what you want. They're taught to gaze at women. Our societal grammar encourages men to objectify the female body. Exactly. I'm pro-porn, but like whatever, go for it. But feminine porn is not much of a thing because the market leans male, because of the way society treats this idea. Yes. How much do you think watching porn has to do with hormones and sex drive? And how much do you think it's coded in our biology to have men be more attracted to watching porn than women? I think that's completely nonsensical. I think it's almost like we can very easily just it's so difficult. I think that's ridiculous. The idea that porn is more popular for men because biologically it's like just something that men are biologically attracted to more. I think that's crazy. You're just completely ignoring the fact that women are viewed as like objects in society rather than individuals. And that leads to the idea that women are something that can be accessed easily online. The idea that, like, of course, men feel as though there's this crisis where they can't access women, and so they resort to watching porn. And that is because we as a society treat women as like a currency, as like something that can be valued. If a woman's not attractive, they're not a proper woman. That's the way society interacts with gender. And it's got nothing to do with biology. I think that's insane. You just want a simple story. Exactly. I think it's inherently a very right-wing way of viewing things, because it is ignoring very, very important ways in which things interact with gender. Think of the normalisation of calling male toddlers heartbreakers and getting asked, "Is that your girlfriend?" about adult women. Yeah, and like having shirts for babies that are like, that say stereotypical, like, kind of, I can't think of an example, like things that say ladies' man on like babies' clothing, bizarre things like that. It is inherently baked into society for men to treat women in this way. And I think if that was removed, it wouldn't be an issue at all. Think about little girls being given baby dolls to care for. And think about like the kind of TV shows that women are brought up on compared to the TV shows men are brought up on. From a very young age, people are taught to expect certain things from themselves. Like in media, women are always the home look after, the people who look after the home. This is very basic, like sociology, and ignoring it is ridiculous, I think. And that's essentially what you're doing. You need to give me a nickname that I can call you, because these random letters. Oh wait, look, I've got an idea. Can you see this on screen? In your name, there is the word Kark. Kark Jark. I'm going to call you Kark, okay? You are Charlie Kark. We are Charlie Kark. Oh. In my society, men are told to look down when women walk by. Still, usually porn issues happen with men. That's going to lead to even more porn issues. If you raise people to completely repress and hide as much of their sexual, like, it's so hard to word. If you are forced to hide your idea of sex and your like sexuality as much as possible, of course that's going to result in like a porn issue, because when you have access to that, it's unhealthy because you've been taught your whole life to ignore it or to look away from it. It is just completely ignoring the intricacies of the way society interacts with gender. If hormones have nothing to do with watching porn, why does losing your balls completely change porn usage? Losing your balls? Obviously, sex drive affects porn, and obviously the two sexes have different sex drives. The fact that you said in my society men are told is a summary of what I'm talking about. Men are told different things and made to interact with gender in a different way societally, and you've proven that. Hormones have nothing to do with watching porn. I think it's very important to split the difference between the unhealthy interaction you're talking about with men and porn, and the fact that sexual desires exist. Both genders have sexual desire, and by removing their sexual organs, of course that sexual desire goes away. But that's completely separate to the unhealthy relationship men have with pornography, which is almost entirely a societal result, right? Does that make sense? I hope I worded that right. Think about the male porn crisis. It's a crisis for the porn watchers, but the OnlyFans models who exploit men by showing their bodies. Exactly, it's completely ignored. It's stupid. It's taking away the agency of women and instead just putting all the blame on women. Do you see who gets centered and victimized? The female body is demonized and women are blamed for the male gaze. Exactly. I just said that, yes. And I know you messaged that ages ago, but I promise I didn't read it. I agree. That's what I was saying. We are Charlie Kirk. We carry the flame, yes. Crying a little, you make the argument and want me to think you're a part of the stoic and intelligent gender. There is no gender. I don't think there is any inherent biological differences in the genders. Crying about porn is not stoic. I agree that raising has an effect, but I think biology is also a factor. Okay, I think that's just where we disagree, because I think biology is such a minute difference in the way people act. It is completely irrelevant in this discussion. It is almost entirely upbringing and raising and the way society interacts with you. That's my belief. Do you think men and women have equal amounts of sexual desires and hormone? I think once society treats them different, once society stops treating them so differently as like certain gender roles and stuff, the differences are minute and completely irrelevant. Think about complete uproar Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey caused. Women show a little bit of sexual interest and society loses its mind. I think it's such a clear factor that is just being ignored. It's so obvious that society has an unimaginable effect over gender and differences. Women have a cycle of sexual desires related to fertility when men have a constant desire like a refilling bar. I just think it's so minute and irrelevant that it's not even worth discussing. Does that make sense? Like, it doesn't have a realistic effect when the difference of society is taken away. Does that make sense? That's my core. Women have one egg every 9 months. I think women have different amounts of eggs depending on like their diet. Does that make sense? Me and my partner are like pretty... I was going to say, that's why I was making jokes about eating eggs. Me and my partner are pretty like, we try and follow a vegan diet, so we don't actually have eggs very often at all. If that makes sense. I was assuming he was joking, so that's why I didn't bring up the one egg every 9 months. Okay, it is. It really is like talking to a man from the Middle Ages. And it is also taken the entire agency away from women. Yeah. It's melting my brain a little bit. Do you have a girlfriend, or have you ever had a girlfriend? Fertility doesn't have anything to do with sexual desires. But Kark says it does. And Kark has observed that people have one egg per 9 months. Obviously, that causes their desires to be different. We are Charlie Kark. Oh. And more selective, because a man can impregnate 200 women while a woman has one child. Yeah, I think that was relevant 500,000 years ago when we were relying on biology for survival, but that is not in any way relevant nowadays. That has completely become irrelevant. Does that make sense? Oh, come on. How does fertility not influence sexual desires? Obviously, desire is related to fertility because biologically, the body wants reproduction. Again, I think that was relevant 1,000 years ago when we were, not 1,000, 10, 100,000 years ago when we were relying on that for reproduction. But that's completely irrelevant now. Dude, I'm a woman. I feel sexual desire whenever I want, not only when I'm ovulating. No, Kark is the expert. I think Kark is telling you have an egg every 9 months. So now you have to have scrambled eggs every 9 months. Did you know Tiresias in Greek mythology by the ancient Greeks said women are more promiscuous and like sex more? He was supposed to be both male and female, and he has expressed women like to fuck more. Your body hasn't progressed past reproduction. Women get more desire when they are fertile. This is measurable, and you can Google a study that shows you this. You're creating an emotional argument. Again, I think these differences are so relevant nowadays that they do not change the way you act anymore. Does that make sense? Please Google, are women more horny when they are fertile? Are you trying to get me banned? I'm not Googling horniness. Yes, during ovulation you feel more. Women can want sex when they want. Yeah. It's difficult, isn't it? Oh, please Google blah, blah, blah. How about you Google some stuff? Also, Googling... You're assuming that Google is like ignoring societal differences. Yes, many women experience increased sexual desires and a high libido during their fertile window, which occurs in the days leading up to and during ovulation. This phenomenon is driven by a peak in estrogen and a surge in testosterone, enhancing feelings of attraction and intimacy. Was that Google, Mr. Clark? I'm saying that I think it's so irrelevant that it is not the cause of differences within the way people interact in society. Just because the sexual desires come at a different time, and I mean, the difference is quite minute. I don't like ContraPoints as she is a Zionist, but I recommend you watch her video titled Twilight. She does a very so stoic exploration of gendered sexuality. Interesting. I'll add that to the list of things to watch. I know you're talking to Mr. Kark. We are Charlie Kark. But I will also watch that. And I don't like Zionists. She's trans, so maybe her brain is smarter because of what? ContraPoints. What's it about? Twilight. I won't watch it on stream, but I will watch that at some point. Interesting, thank you. She's trans. As a woman, there are things that make me not want to have sexual relations, and most women agree that they feel less sex drive when men treat them like their mother. She is trans. Again. It's all about the way society interacts with you, rather than the way biology interacts with you. There's no like biological thing that has such an influence over you that changes your... It's so hard to word. It's almost entirely the way society brings you up. less sex drive with a man who treat them like their mother. Yeah, like if Mr. Clark was talking to me about how my gender decides the way I act, I would not want to have sex with him. But I don't want to have sex with men anyway, so it's fine. With men anyway. Focus. According to scientific research, biological, evolutionary, and psychological studies indicate that men on average have a higher sexual desire libido than women. Listen, these ideas are not... these ideas don't separate biology and societal influence, right? I agree that under our umbrella of society, right? Under our society, there are inherent differences between men and women based on the way they are brought up, right? Brought up, right? Brought up. Correct? That's what I'm saying. I think that those differences are separate to biology and are more focused on the way society interacts with people. Zygo, thank you for following me. Woke gay Marxist. Where's my follow? I need more followers. No, sorry. This is what Google says. Guys, science says so. Guys, science says so. I mean, science is quite reliant most of the time. You called what I said pseudoscience, so I googled what mainstream science says, and now fine, you're woke enough. Guys, I've gained 2 followers this stream. Thank you. Thank you. I'm getting close to being the #1 most followed Twitch channel. So thank you. No, I'm not saying nerd science stuff. I'm laughing at scientific research because anyone who is aware of academia knows that science is not consensus. Give me article names or studies. Exactly. We'd have to spend a lot of time like breaking down these studies if we were want to be making an argument about it. We don't want to just Google something and then base it off the first thing that comes up. Dude, you have to look at more than an AI summary. Scientific. Exactly. It's like when I look up, is IQ based on genetics? Google tells me, yes, it is. But after spending like 4 days looking into it, I come to the realization that it is absolutely not based on genetics in the slightest. And that Google is based on neo-Nazi studies based around neo-Nazi funding and all of this nonsense. Google is not very reliable, but I see that's separate, I guess. I don't know. My brain's melting. Woke Game Marxist, thank you for the follow. I will be even more woke when my brain works fully. Just a reminder, guys, I am disabled. I am disabled, and at the moment, my brain is broken. So that's why I'm a little bit out of it. Dude, you have to look at more than AI summary, scientific research, yes. But there are many factors to life than just science. Psychological factors affect biological hormones. Again, the core of this, the core of what everyone is agreeing on, I think, is that biology doesn't really affect anything nowadays, and it's more society. Do you think those differences in libido are because of how they are raised and not their genitals just deliver a different type and amount of hormones? I think that has such a small difference, it doesn't really matter. Does that make sense? Like, there are some extreme outliers where people have a complete lack of certain testosterones or certain hormones that it completely breaks their sexual differences. But we have moved as a species away from relying on that kind of biology, and instead now it is decided almost entirely, in my opinion, entirely on the way society interacts with you. Men are brought up to value sexual drive massively over anything else. Does that make sense? Also, Mr. Clark, give me a follow. I know you delete your account every 5 days and make a new one. I don't know why, but give me a follow so it temporarily looks hot. Yes, yes. Thank you. 3 followers, guys. Oh, wow. I'm sorry I'm forcing you all to follow. Thank you. Do you think... Yes, IQ is based on... No. If that wasn't the case, some guy with Down syndrome should have the same IQ as some guy without Down syndrome. You should ask whether... Yes, but the thing to consider is... I mean, that's a good example. So firstly, there are some extreme biological outliers, like disabilities, for example, okay? like you've highlighted. But there are some people with Down syndrome who are much more intelligent than some people who don't have Down syndrome and who have been like brought up in a way that's very like mistreating, right? I hope that makes sense. And I think that's a good example of the fact that it is not down to genetics really in the slightest, other than extreme cases. It's almost entirely based on the treatment you get when you're being brought up or the treatment that society gives you. That is an exception, not the... What's the phrase? You've pointed out an exception, not the rule? No. That is an exception, not the... See, this is the problem. There's a word in my brain, but I can't reach it because of all the fog. That is the exception, not the... The rule's not the word. What am I talking... Oh, my brain hurts, guys. I think how you... IQ is based on genetics, blah, blah, blah. I think how you're raised is mostly irrelevant to your hormones. It's mostly diet, sex, exercise, so on. Exactly. Wait, what? Oh no, how you are raised is mostly irrelevant. Yes, it's arranged. Down syndrome influences it a lot and other stuff influences it less. No, my argument is that Down syndrome is an exception and it influences it a lot, but that everything else is completely irrelevant because it's got such a minute difference. That's my argument. But your argument that it has such a massive influence that we need to be structuring society around those differences. That's the difference in our arguments, I think. You think that we should structure marriage in a way that is based around the inherent minute differences between gender instead of restructuring our society to get rid of those differences. Does that make sense? It's not like an instant drop where there's this inherent difference between the disability category and the normal. There literally is. There literally is. There are extreme outliers caused by massive disabilities that cause that difference in IQ. And then other than that, it is almost entirely based on your upbringing and societal factors. That is exactly what I'm arguing. The opposite of what you just said. The disabilities are the only cause of such an extreme variant. Does that make sense? Everything else is completely negligible. It is not just a range. Intelligence and IQ is almost entirely based on how you are brought up. And I think anything else that factors into it, like genetics, is so minute and meaningless, it's not even worth bringing up. I think we're arguing two different things. I'll be straight up with you. Yes, there are biological differences between the sexes, but in our complicated society and discord, I reject gender essentialism, which says women are X, men are X. I agree. I instead act, why are women X and men X? I'm asking that what historical philosophical men have historically been celebrated for sex. I'm not completely disregarding these differences because historically there are reasons why certain differences have come about based on like evolution and how like needing to survive, right? But my argument has consistently been we as a society have moved away from that needing to be relevant, and so it's not relevant and it doesn't have an effect on us, I don't think. But unfortunately our society is structured around it, and so it's still lingering. Without untangling these heavy expectations, looking at biology as a broad explanation as to why the genders are the way they are is simply lazy. And it is also damaging to the progress that we're making of moving away from that. You're suggesting that we need to have stuff like marriages be structured in a way that caters towards these differences that we have found in society, whereas my argument is that we should be breaking down society and making it so that it's completely ignoring these differences that are a result of its own issues so that we can move towards more equality, which would completely remove the idea of any of these changes, I think. So hard to string sentences together, guys. My brain is melting. I don't think it's just biology. Of course, not all women are X, but it's a factor in men and women are heavily scout. No, I don't think it's heavily of an influence. I don't think it's much of an influence at all, in my opinion. To what extent is biology to blame for our current societal gender expectations? Because, like I said, the ancient Greeks thought women were more sexual. There's plenty of societies that reject patriarchy. Disabilities are just random variations in genetics that we label negative, and that's it. It's all just genetic variability. I think if we look at the actual range of differences between non-extreme cases, it is negligible. But then when we locate the extremes, like certain disabilities, that is the only instance of such an extreme IQ change, right? The other things that may be causing this is stuff like, look at my proletariat. I know, it's tough, isn't it? It's tough, brother. I have this feeling every stream sometimes. Most of the time it's someone who is right-wing, but it's interesting having this discussion with someone like Mr. Clark is in my stream quite often, and he's generally very left-wing, I'd say. And so this has been a very interesting conversation. Do you think a woman can be smarter than you? Yeah, there you go, that's good. These guys argued that they had less self-control and were less rational. They are not talking about hormones and libido. But it's interesting that you make that differentiation there, but you ignore it when we're saying that it's much more, like we can push it back a lot further. Does that make sense? We don't have to ask what anyone thinks. We have tools to measure this. Women on average have less libido. But is that a result of the... You can't ignore society in these kind of studies. And I think that it's society that has that influence over that difference rather than biology. Yeah. My brain's melting. The ancient Greeks thought women should only be used for reproduction. Plato's Symposium says only two men can have true love. And that love is a woman with a woman is earthly and tainted. So why are you not with a man? I think it's just another good example of gender being constantly changing and entirely decided on the way society interacts with their gender roles, right? Remove the gender roles, remove society's influence, and there will be absolutely no difference, in my opinion. Because at this point, it sounds like you just hate women so much. I don't think it's anything to do with hating women. I think it's about controlling women. It's about them believing that without structuring society in a way that decides what women do, they will not act in the way that they're supposed to be acting in. Does that make sense? Sounds like you just hate women so much. Just fuck a dude. Shut up and fuck a stoic dude. Oh my god. What have I said that indicates I dislike women? Yeah, I don't think he's presented. You want an angel at home when women are rejecting that. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I agree with that bit. Mr. Clark, you're talking about gender as if it's like a baked in thing, something that's guaranteed, right? And then you're saying that there's real crises coming up when women aren't following that baked in behaviour, right? And you're saying that men are having crises as well. I think that is evidence enough that these gender roles are completely made up, right? It's difficult. My main core of this argument is that we should not be structuring traditions and society in a way that makes certain groups act a certain way. We shouldn't be setting up marriages in a way that prevents women from acting in a certain way. I don't think men or women can go beyond those roles. I think that porn affects men because of those roles. What? You don't think men can break out? What? That's completely ignoring numerous instances of societies that completely ignore gender roles. That some societies have a complete reversal of these gender roles. So you're going to probably not find a good girlfriend, and that's okay, because let's go Darwinian. You're going to be left behind by biology because you're frankly backward and living in a fantasy world. I think you have a porn issue, man. It's hurting my brain a little bit, guys. It's hurting my brain a little bit. Why are you mad? I don't like stupid. Yeah, I think we are just having a conversation, but at the same time, it is a very... it's a display of ignorance, I think, rather than... Hey, listen, I think we've had a productive conversation, but from my point of view, it's a very, very ignorant point of view that you're holding, Mr. Clark, which is probably where the hostility is coming from. Does that make sense? Like, if I were to see these kind of views reflected from someone who's right-wing, I'd be quite frustrated. I do think men can act in feminine ways, but I don't think the male sex in society entirely is able to be socialised out of their general biological behaviour. See, that is where we fundamentally, massively disagree. You're not an equal debate opponent. I'm not hostile, man. I'm very calm, don't worry. I'm not saying you're hostile, I'm saying I would be hostile. Does that make sense? I'm saying that the reason woke gay Marxist is hostile is because it's a very ignorant point of view to be holding. And ignorance is frustrating. What does this mean? I think he's saying that, do you apply these kind of ideas of biology affecting the way you act to differences in race as well as gender? Because you can't really say, well, I don't know. They go hand in hand, the idea that everything is based on IQ. Everything is based on genetics. I think men can act in feminine ways, but I don't think the male sex in society is entirely able to be socialised out of the general biological behaviour. I don't think that the behaviour is decided biologically. I think my core belief is the opposite of what you said. I think that... I'm getting lots of messages. Oh, it's dinner time, guys. It's dinner time. Ding, ding, ding. Do it again. You ready? Oh. Come on, ding, 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 ding. Yeah, ding, ding. That means dinner. That means dinner. Oh, more. Sing, ding, ding. Guys, that's the alarm for dinner. That means I'm going to go eat some nice food. I've been, considering I was quite ill in the build-up to this stream, I've done quite well doing such a long stream. Thank you guys for joining. Do you believe in race? I think the conversation moving towards race essentialism is a very good way of shutting down the idea that everything's based on biology. But it's also not something that I have the mental capacity to talk about right now. I think gender is the bigger difference, but race is too, to a lesser extent. That doesn't mean I think in some racial hierarchy with whites at the top, LeMayo, and black people below. I just think that obviously there are probably hormonal and mental differences between races. Whether minor or major, it seems impossible for there not to be. No. It's a philosophy term, my bad. I'll just say it. Do you believe that every race, ethnicity has an essence that pushes them to act in a certain way? See, that's the core difference between your belief, Mr. Clark, and everyone else's belief. You think that actually has an influence, whereas I believe even if there is some small change, it's so minute that it's not even relevant. Almost everything is decided based on the way society treats you. I will enjoy dinner. I will have a lovely dinner. Thank you, guys. It's been 2.5 hours. I never streamed this long. I very much enjoyed it. Thank you for having a discussion with me. I hope everyone has a good rest of your day. I will try not to leave it another 600 weeks before I stream again. If you enjoyed, you've already followed, because I know everyone here has already followed. Go check out my YouTube. I've been making some good videos. I've also got a very big video regarding reforms policies coming out. So if you see that come up, make sure to, like and subscribe and all that so that it gets lots of views. I hope to see all you guys next stream, hopefully later in this week. Thank you very much. There's so much constant chaos going on that I'm sure there'll be lots of reasons to stream later on. It's been a very interesting conversation. And again, thank you all for showing up and talking, and I hope to see you next time.